Waxworks weren't made to be looked at for nothing.
By a voice coming from the one marked dumb.
If you think we're waxworks,
He said.
you ought to pay, you know. Waxworks weren't made to be looked at for nothing, nohow. Contrary-wise,
Added the one marked D.
if you think we're alive, you ought to speak.
I'm sure I'm very sorry.
Was all Alice could say, for the words of the old song kept ringing through her head like the ticking of a clock, and she could hardly help saying them out loud.
Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle, for Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Just then flew down a monstrous crow, as black as a tar barrel, which frightened both the heroes so they quite forgot their quarrel.
I know what you're thinking about,
Said Tweedledum.
but it isn't so, nohow. Contrary-wise,
Continued Tweedledee.
if it was so, it might be, and if it were so, it would be. But as it isn't, it ain't. That's logic.
I was thinking,
Alice said very politely.
which is the best way out of this wood? It's getting so dark. Would you tell me, please?
But the little men only looked at each other and grinned. They looked so exactly like a couple of great schoolboys that Alice couldn't help pointing her finger at Tweedledum and saying,
First, boy.
Nohow.
Tweedledum cried out briskly and shut his mouth up again with a snap.
Next, boy.
Said Alice, passing on to Tweedledee, though she felt quite certain he would only shout out,
Contrary-wise,
and so he did.
you've been wrong.
Cried Tweedledum.
The first thing in a visit is to say, how do you do, and shake hands.
And here the two brothers gave each other a hug, and then they held out the two hands that were free to shake hands with her. Alice did not like shaking hands with either of them first, for fear of hurting the other one's feelings. So, as the best way out of the difficulty, she took hold of both hands at once. The next moment, they were dancing round a ring. This seemed quite natural, she remembered afterwards, and she was not even surprised to hear music playing. It seemed to come from the tree under which they were dancing, and it was done, as well as she could make it out, by the branches rubbing one across the other, like fiddles and fiddlesticks.
But it certainly was funny.
Alice said afterwards when she was telling her sister the history of all this.
To find myself singing, Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush. I don't know when I began it, but somehow I felt as if I'd been singing it a long, long time.
The other two dancers were fat and very soon out of breath.
4 times round is enough for one dance.
Tweedledum panted out, and they left off dancing as suddenly as they had begun. The music stopped at the same moment. Then they let go of Alice's hands and stood looking at her for a minute. There was a rather awkward pause, as Alice didn't know how to begin a conversation with people she had just been dancing with.
It would never do to say, How do you do, now?
She said to herself.
We seem to have got beyond that, somehow. I hope you're not much tired.
She said at last.
Nohow, and thank you very much for asking.
Said Tweedledum.
So much obliged.
Added Tweedledee.
You like poetry?
Yes, pretty well. Some poetry.
Alice said doubtfully.
Would you tell me which road leads out of the wood?
What shall I repeat to her?
Said Tweedledee, looking round at Tweedledum with great solemn eyes, and not noticing Alice's question.
The walrus and the carpenter is the longest.
Tweedledum replied, giving his brother an affectionate hug. Tweedledee began instantly.
The sun was shining.
Here Alice ventured to interrupt him.
If it's very long,
She said as politely as she could.
would you please tell me first which road?
Tweedledee smiled gently and began again.
The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done.
It's very rude of him
She said.
to come and spoil the fun.
The sea was wet as wet could be. The sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead. There were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand.
If this were only cleared away,
They said.
it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose
The walrus said.
that they could get it clear?
I doubt it.
Said the carpenter and shed a bitter tear.
Oh, oysters, come and walk with us.
The walrus did beseech.
A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We could not do with more than 4 to give a hand to each.
The oldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, you know, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more, and more, and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row.
The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings.
But wait a minute, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat.
No hurry.
Said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that.
A loaf of bread,
The walrus said.
is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed.
But not on us, the oysters cried, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do.
The night is fine,
The walrus said.
Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice.
The carpenter said nothing but.
Cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice.
It seems a shame
The walrus said.
to play them such a trick after we've brought them out so far and made them trot so quick.
The carpenter said nothing but.
The butter's spread too thick.
I weep for you.
The walrus said.
I deeply sympathize.
With sobs and tears, he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes.
Oh, oysters.
Said the carpenter.
You've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again?
But answer came there none, and that was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one.
I like the walrus best,
said Alice.
because you see he was a little sorry for the poor oysters.
He ate more than the carpenter, though.
Said Tweedledee.
You see, he held his handkerchief in front, so that the carpenter couldn't count how many he took, contrariwise.
That was mean.
Alice said indignantly.
Then I like the carpenter best, if he didn't eat so many as the walrus.
But he ate as many as he could get.
Said Tweedledum. This was a puzzler. After a pause, Alice began.
Well, they were both very unpleasant characters.
Here she checked herself in some alarm at hearing something that sounded to her like the puffing of a large steam engine in the wood near them, though she feared it was more likely to be a wild beast.
Are there any lions or tigers about here?
She asked timidly.
It's only the Red King snoring.
Said Tweedledee.
Come and look at him.
The brothers cried, and they each took one of Alice's hands and led her up to where the king was sleeping.
Isn't he a lovely sight?
Said Tweedledum. Alice couldn't say honestly that he was. He had a tall red nightcap on with a tassel, and he was lying crumpled up into a sort of untidy heap and snoring loud,
Fit to snore his head off.
as Tweedledum remarked.
I'm afraid he'll catch cold with lying in the damp grass.
Said Alice, who was a very thoughtful little girl.
He's dreaming now.
Said Tweedledee.
And what do you think he's dreaming about?
Alice said.
Nobody can guess that.
Why, about you.
Tweedledee exclaimed, clapping his hands triumphantly.
And if he left off dreaming about you, where do you suppose you'd be?
Where I am now, of course.
Said Alice.
Not you.
Tweedledee retorted contemptuously.
You'd be nowhere. Why, you're only a sort of thing in his dream. If that there king was to wake,
Added Tweedledum.
he'd go out, bang, just like a candle.
I shouldn't.
Alice exclaimed indignantly.
Besides, if I'm only a sort of thing in his dream, what are you? I should like to know.
Ditto,
Said Tweedledum.
ditto, ditto.
Cried Tweedledee. He shouted this so loud that Alice couldn't help saying.
Hush! You'll be waking him, I'm afraid, if he makes so much noise.
Well, it's no use you're talking about waking him.
Said Tweedledum.
When you're only one of the things in his dream, you know very well you're not real.
I am real.
Said Alice, and began to cry.
You won't make yourself a bit realer by crying.
Tweedledee remarked.
There's nothing to cry about.
If I wasn't real,
Alice said, half laughing through her tears. It all seemed so ridiculous.
I shouldn't be able to cry.
I hope you don't suppose those are real tears.
Tweedledum interrupted in a tone of great contempt.
I know they're talking nonsense,
Alice thought to herself.
and it's foolish to cry about it.
So she brushed away her tears and went on as cheerfully as she could.
At any rate, I'd better be getting out of the wood, for really it's coming on very dark. Do you think it's going to rain?
Tweedledum spread a large umbrella over himself and his brother and looked up into it.
No, I don't think it is.
He said.
At least, not under here, no how.
But it may rain outside.
It may, if it chooses.
Said Tweedledee.
With no objection, contrariwise.
Selfish things.
Thought Alice, and she was just going to say,
Good night.
and leave them, when Tweedledum sprang out from under the umbrella and seized her by the wrist.
Do you see that?
He said in a voice choking with passion, and his eyes grew large and yellow all in a moment as he pointed with a trembling finger at a small white thing lying under the tree.
It's only a rattle.
Alice said, after careful examination of the little white thing.
Not a rattlesnake, you know.
She added hastily, thinking that he was frightened.
Only an old rattle, quite old and broken.
I knew it was.
Cried Tweedledum, beginning to stamp about wildly and tear his hair.
It's spoilt, of course.
Here he looked at Tweedledee, who immediately sat down on the ground and tried to hide himself under the umbrella. Alice laid her hand upon his arm and said in a soothing tone.
You needn't be so angry about an old rattle.
But it isn't old.
Tweedledum cried in a greater fury than ever,
It's new, I tell you. I bought it yesterday. My nice new rattle.
and his voice rose to a perfect scream. All this time, Tweedledee was trying his best to fold up the umbrella with himself in it, which was such an extraordinary thing to do that it quite took off Alice's attention from the angry brother. But he couldn't quite succeed, and it ended in his rolling over, bundled up in the umbrella, with only his head out. And there he lay, opening and shutting his mouth and his large eyes.
Looking more like a fish than anything else.
Alice thought.
Of course you agree to have a battle.
Tweedledum said in a calmer tone.
I suppose so.
The other sulkily replied as he crawled out of the umbrella.
Only she must help us to dress up, you know.
So the two brothers went off hand in hand into the wood, and returned in a minute with their arms full of things, such as bolsters, blankets, hearth rugs, tablecloths, dish covers, and coal scuttles.
I hope you're a good hand at pinning and tying strings.
Tweedledum remarked.
Every one of these things has got to go on, somehow or other.
Alice said afterwards she had never seen such a fuss made about anything in all her life. The way those two bustled about, and the quantity of things they put on, and the trouble they gave her in tying strings and fastening buttons.
Really, they'll be more like bundles of old clothes than anything else, by the time they're ready.
She said to herself as she arranged a bolster round the neck of Tweedledee.
To keep his head from being cut off.
As he said.
You know,
He added very gravely.
it's one of the most serious things that can possibly happen to one in a battle. To get one's head cut off.
Alice laughed aloud, but she managed to turn it into a cough for fear of hurting his feelings.
Do I look very pale?
Said Tweedledum, coming up to have his helmet tied on. He called it a helmet, though it certainly looked much more like a saucepan.
Well, yes, a little.
Alice replied gently.
I'm very brave generally.
He went on in a low voice.
Only today, I happen to have a headache. And I've got a toothache.
Said Tweedledee, who had overheard the remark.
I'm far worse off than you.
Then you'd better not fight today.
Said Alice, thinking it a good opportunity to make peace.
We must have a bit of a fight, but I don't care about going on long.
Said Tweedledum.
What's the time now?
Tweedledee looked at his watch and said.
4:30. Let's fight till 6 and then have dinner.
Said Tweedledum.
Very well.
The other said rather sadly.
And she can watch us, only you'd better not come very close.
He added.
I generally hit everything I can see when I get really excited. And I hit everything within reach,
Cried Tweedledum.
whether I can see it or not.
Alice laughed.
You must hit the trees pretty often, I should think.
She said. Tweedledum looked round him with a satisfied smile.
I don't suppose.
He said.
There'll be a tree left standing for ever so far round by the time we've finished.
And all about a rattle.
Said Alice, still hoping to make them a little ashamed of fighting for such a trifle.
I shouldn't have minded it so much,
Said Tweedledum.
if it hadn't been a new one.
I wish the monstrous crow would come.
Thought Alice.
There's only one sword, you know.
Tweedledum said to his brother.
But you can have the umbrella. It's quite as sharp. Only we must begin quick. It's getting as dark as it can. And darker,
said Tweedledee. It was getting dark so suddenly that Alice thought there must be a thunderstorm coming on.
What a thick black cloud that is.
She said.
And how fast it comes. Why, I do believe it's got wings.
It's the crow!
Tweedledum cried out in a shrill voice of alarm, and the two brothers took to their heels and were out of sight in a moment. Alice ran a little way into the wood and stopped under a large tree.
It can never get at me here.
She thought.
It's far too large to squeeze itself in among the trees. But I wish it wouldn't flap its wings so. It makes quite a hurricane in the wood. Here's somebody's shawl being blown away.
End of chapter 4. Chapter 5. Wool and Water. She caught the shawl as she spoke and looked about for the owner. In another moment, the White Queen came running wildly through the wood, with both arms stretched out wide as if she were flying, and Alice very civilly went to meet her with the shawl.
I'm very glad I happened to be in the way.
Alice said as she helped her to put on her shawl again. The White Queen only looked at her in a helpless, frightened sort of way, and kept repeating something in a whisper to herself that sounded like,
Bread and butter, bread and butter.
and Alice felt that if there was to be any conversation at all, she must manage it herself. So she began rather timidly.
Am I addressing the White Queen? Well, yes, if you call that addressing.
The Queen said.
It isn't my notion of the thing at all.
This unforgettable vacation memory. It didn't actually begin here. This memory began when Mom booked her family.
Shopping. You love rewards. Make earning rewards happen. Next time you shop, earn cash back at your favorite businesses.
Bro, I did cats right. Hi, you're on a rock, floating in space. Pretty cool, huh? Some of it's water. Fuck it. Actually, most of it's water. I can't even get from here to there without buying a boat. It's sad. I'm sad. I miss you. A long time ago, actually never, and also now, nothing is nowhere. When? Never. Makes sense, right? Like I said, it didn't happen. Nothing was never anywhere. That's why it's been everywhere. It's been so everywhere, you don't need a where. You don't even need a when. That's how every it gets.
That's true. All they do is true there. You can handle it. You knew that already. Keep going.
Forget this. I want to be something. Go somewhere. Do something. I want things to change. I want to invent time and space. And I know it's possible because everything is here and it probably already happened. I just don't know when to start. And that's exactly where it started. Oh, I paused it. I think there's a universe now. What's it made of? Quarks and stuff. Ah, that's a thing. In a place. Don't like it? Try a new place. At a different time. Try to stick together because the world is going to get bigger and emptier. But it's not empty yet. It's still very full and about 1 jillion degrees.
Tears are gonna roll my face down. I'm just gonna sign myself out of here like a bug. Cats will too, if you don't joke about it. Act accordingly, joke around with your soldier, but keep that soldier morale up, folks. There's gonna be suicides. Soldier suicides are very happy.
Great news, the quarks are now happily married in groups of 3, called a proton or a neutron. And there's something else flying around too that wants to join in but can't because it's still too... Great news, the protons and neutrons are now happily married to each other. Some of them even doubled up. Great news, the electrons have now joined in. Congratulations, the world is now a bunch of gas in space. But it's getting closer together. And it's getting closer together. And it's getting closer together. It's a star. New shit just got made. Some stars burn out and die. Bigger stars burn out and die with passion and make some brand new, way crazier shit. Space dust. Which allows newer, more interesting stars to be made and then die and explode into even crazier space dust. So now stars have cool stuff around them, like rocks, ice, and funny clouds, which can make some very interesting things. Like this ball of flaming rocks, for example. Holy shit, we just got hit with another ball of flaming rocks. And it kind of made a mess, which is... Weather update, it's raining rocks from outer space. Weather update, those rocks might have had water inside them and now there's hot steam in the sky. Weather update, cooler temperatures today and the floor is no longer lava. Weather update, it's raining. Severe flooding alert, the entire world is now an ocean. Volcano alert. That's land. What? Something's alive in the ocean. Oh cool, like a plant or an animal? No, a microscopic speck. It lives at the bottom of the ocean and eats chemical soup, which is being served hot and fresh, made from gnarly space ingredients left over from when it was raining rocks or whatever. Oh yeah, and it can do that. It has secret instructions written inside itself telling it how to build another one of itself. So that's pretty nifty, I would say. Tired of living at the bottom of the ocean? Now you can eat sunlight. Using a revolutionary technique, you can convert sunlight into food. Side effect, now there's oxygen everywhere and the sky's blue. Then the earth might have been a snowball for a while, maybe even a couple of times. It's a sponge, it's a plant, it's a worm, and some other types of weird, strange water bugs and strange fish. It's the Cambrian explosion. Wow, that's animals and stuff. But we're still in the ocean. Hey, can we go on land? No. Why? The sun is a deadly laser. Oh, okay. Not anymore, there's a blanket. Now the animals can go on land. Come on, animals, let's go on land. Nope, can't walk yet. And there's no food yet, so I don't care. Okay, will you learn to walk if there's plants up here? Maybe, said some bugs and fish. Okay, so I can go on land, but I have to go back in the water to have babies. Learn to use an egg.
I was already doing that.
Use a stronger egg. Put water in it. Have a baby on land, in an egg. Water is in the egg. Baby in the egg, in the water, in the egg. Works for me. Bye-bye, ocean. And now everything's huge, including bugs. Want to see a map of the land? Sure. Oh fuck, now everything's dead. Just kidding, here are the survivors. Keep your eye on this one because it's about to become the dinosaurs. Here's another map of the land. Yeah, broke apart, don't worry about it, does that all the time. Here comes a meteor. It's mammal time, here come the mammals. Look at those breasts, now they're gonna dominate the world. And one of them just learned how to grab stuff and walk. No, like, walk like that and grab stuff at the same time. And bang rocks together to make pointed rocks. Ouch, and set things on fire. Youch, and make crazy sounds with their voice, which can mean different things. And now they're everywhere. Almost. What, you can walk over here? Cool. Well, I guess we're stuck here now. Let's review, there's people on the planet. And they're chasing their food. Fuck it, time to plant some grass. Look at this, I control the food now. Now everyone will want to be my friend and live near me. Let's all build houses, except mine is bigger because I own the food. This is great, I wonder if anyone else is doing this. Tired of using rocks for everything? Use metal. It's underground. Better farming was just invented in a sweet dank valley right in between these two rivers. And the animals are helping. Guess what happens next? More food. And more people who came to buy the food. Now you need people to help make the food and keep track of the sales. And now you need houses for people to live in and people to make the houses. And now there's more people and they invent things, which makes things better. And more people come and there's more farming and more people to make more things for more people. And now there's business, money, writing, laws, power. Coming soon to a dank river valley near you. Meanwhile, out in the middle of nowhere, the horse is probably being tamed. Why is all my metal so lame and lumpy? Tired of using lame, sad metal? Introducing bronze, made with special ingredient tin from the far lands of Tinland. I don't know, my dealer won't tell me where he gets it. Also, guess what? Egypt. Meanwhile, out in the middle of nowhere, they figured out how to put wheels on a horse. Now we're getting somewhere. Also, China. Did I mention Israel? The Middle East is getting more complicated. Maybe because it's in the middle of the East. Knock, knock, or plop, plop. It's the people with the horses. And they made an empire. And then everyone else copied their horses. Greeks. Ah, look, it must be the Greeks. Or a beta version of the Greeks. Let's check in with the Indus River Valley civilization. They're gone. Guess who's not gone? China. New arrivals in India. Maybe it's those horse people I was talking about, or their cousins or something. And they wrote some hymns and mantras and stuff. We could make a religion out of this. There's the Bronze Age collapse. Now the Phoenicians can get down to business. Also, can we switch to a metal that's a little easier to find? Thanks. Look who came back to Israel. It's the 12 tribes of Israel. And they believe in God. Just one, though. He's got like a 10-step program. Here's some huge heads. Must be the Olmecs. The Phoenicians make some colonies. The Greeks copy their idea and make some colonies. The Phoenicians made a colony so big it makes colonies. Here comes the Assyrian Empire. Never mind, it's the Babylonian Median. It's the Persian Empire. Wow, that's big. Ah, the Buddha was just enlightened. Who's the Buddha? This guy who sat under a tree for so long that he figured out how to ignore the fact that we're all dying. You can make a religion out of this. Oops, China just broke, but while it was breaking, Confucius was figuring out how to have good morals. Ah, the Greeks just had the idea of thinking about stuff. And right over here, Alexander just had the idea of conquering the entire Persian Empire. It's a great idea. He was great. And now he's dead. Hopefully the rest of the gang will be able to share the empire evenly between them. Knock knock, it's Chandragupta. He says, get the hell out of here. Will you get the hell out of here if I give you 500 elephants? Okay, thanks, bye. Time to conquer all of India. Or most of India. But what about this part? That's the Tamil Kings. No one conquers the Tamil Kings. Who are the Tamil Kings? Merchants, probably. And they've got spices. I'd like to buy the spices. Me, said the Arabians, swiftly buying and selling it to the rest of the world. Hey, China put itself back together again with good morals as their main philosophy. Actually, they have 3 main philosophies. Out here, the horse nomads run wild and free, and they would like to ransack your city. Let's check the Greekification levels of the Greekified kingdoms. Greekification overload. Bye, said the Parthians. Bye, said the Jews. Hi, said the Parthians, taking over the entire place. Hey, said the Romans, eating the entire Mediterranean for breakfast. Thanks for invading our homeland, said the Jews, who were starting to get tired of people invading their homeland. Hi, everything's great, said some guy who seems to be getting very popular and is then arrested and killed for being too popular, which only makes him more popular. You can make a religion out of this. Long silk, now you can buy it from China. They just made a brand new road to the world. Or you can get their own water. Sick, new trade routes, said India, accidentally spreading the religion to the entire southeast. That's a good place for an epic trading kingdom. There goes Buddhism traveling up the Silk Road. I wonder if it'll reach China before it collapses again. Remember the Persian Empire? Yep, said the Persians, making a new one. Axum is getting so powerful they would like to build a long stick. Has anyone populated Madagascar yet? Let's do it together. China's